Look, folks, let me tell you something very simple. Because the so-called experts make it sound very complicated so they can keep their jobs. What you're seeing right now in the Middle East is not an accident. It's not a tragic series of events. It's not a misunderstanding between cultures. No, it's the bill coming due after decades of stupidity from weak leaders, globalists, and people who never once had to live with the consequences of their bad ideas. For years, you had the geniuses in Washington, Brussels, all over the place telling you, we need to empower Iran, we need to give them money, we need to show respect, we need to sign beautiful pieces of paper. They called it engagement. I call it paying your arsonist to watch the matches. They shipped cash, they lifted sanctions, they smiled for the cameras while Tehran laughed behind their backs and poured more rockets into Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, you name it. And every time the fire started, again, what did the geniuses say? We are deeply concerned. We urge both sides to show restraint. Both sides. One side launches rockets at civilians and hides in tunnels. The other side defends itself and tries to keep its people alive. And the experts say, both sides. It's a joke, folks. A very bad, very deadly joke. But something big is happening now. You can feel it. You can see it. For the first time in a long time, the forces of order, of strength, of real power are moving together. The United States, Saudi Arabia, Israel, very different countries, very different cultures, but suddenly they're looking at each other and saying, you know what? We either hang together or we're going to be picked apart one by Tehran and its pet projects like Hamas. So what do? You get a super alliance beginning to form. People don't want to call it that yet, but that's what it is. Washington, Riyadh, Jerusalem, talking quietly, sometimes loudly, sometimes with a lot of drama, building the architecture of a new Middle East. And the goal is very clear. Take the toys away from the terrorists, box in the mullahs, and make sure that the next 50 years are about trade, technology, energy, and AI, not suicide. Vests and rockets made in some basement workshop of freedom in Gaza. Everybody still remembers 2019, even if the media pretends they forgot. Saudi oil facilities get hit, big explosions, smoke in the sky, oil production disrupted. It wasn't a movie, it was real. And suddenly all the think tank talk about regional balance and confidence-building measures looks like what it always was, nonsense. When the pipelines are burning, nobody calls a gender balance committee at the UN. They call somebody with missiles, radars, and the will to use them. That's the moment when Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, young guy, ambitious, a lot of people love him, a lot of people fear him, looks at Washington and says, listen, if you want us in your orbit, if you want us on your team, we need something real, not just nice statements, not just another shared values speech. We need guarantees, we need defenses, we need to know that when Iran sends drones, they don't land on our refineries. And you know what? On that point, he's absolutely right. For decades, the arrangement was Saudi Arabia pumps the oil, America provides the security, the Europeans complain about everything, but still take the cheap energy. Everybody played their little role. Then the globalists tried to rewrite the script, and suddenly nobody knew who was responsible for what anymore. Great for confusion, terrible for actual security. Now the script is being rewritten again, but this time by people who actually understand that the world is dangerous. Saudi Arabia doesn't want to be just a gas station with golden gas pumps. They want to be a power center. They want to be a high-tech, AI-driven, ultra-modern hub, and that means they need more than sand, skyscrapers, and fancy hotels. They need air defenses integrated with Israel. They need American technology plugged into their infrastructure. They need real partnerships, not TED Talks. So you see the Crown Prince storm the White House. That's what the media calls it, like he's landing with paratroopers on the South Lawn, and behind the scenes they're talking about very serious things. Patriot systems, THAAD, F-35 seconds, drones, radars, early warning networks stretching from the Mediterranean to the Gulf. They're not planning for a nice photo. They're planning for the day when Iran decides, let's try our luck again, and suddenly finds its missiles meeting a brick wall of coordinated defenses from Israel, the Gulf, and the U.S. Navy sitting very comfortably offshore. And of course, in the middle of this, you have the professional hand-wringers, mostly in European capitals, a few blocks in Washington, some at the State Department, crying about escalation and provoking Tehran. These are the same people who thought shipping pallets of cash to Iran would make them open a vegan cafe and join the climate movement. Didn't work. The money went to rockets, drones, militias, and more Death to America posters with very bad graphic design. Let's talk about Hamas for a second, because everybody talks about Gaza like it's some mysterious tragedy that just fell out of the sky. Hamas is not a mystery. Hamas is a branch office. It's Iran's forward operating base on the Mediterranean. Tehran writes the checks, sends the weapons, provides the training, and Hamas does the dirty work: rocket attacks, kidnapping, tunnels under schools and hospitals. And every time the IDF responds, the same chorus appears on TV. We must understand the root causes. Here's a root cause for you. Tehran pays, Hamas plays. Very simple. Israel figured this out a long time ago. They're not just fighting a local gang, they're fighting a network. After the big attacks, when Israel hit back hard, they weren't just angry, they were strategic. They started hitting command centers, tunnels, depots, the whole infrastructure that makes Hamas useful to Iran. They want to turn Hamas from Tehran's sharp knife into a bent spoon. Still dangerous if you're careless, but not very effective as a weapon. And behind Israel, you see something very important: the quiet hum of cooperation. American satellites, Gulf radars, naval ships in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, intelligence shared in real time, tracking movements, cutting off supply lines. When that machine is working, Hamas doesn't look like a proud resistance movement. It looks like a badly run franchise that can't get deliveries because the landlord just locked the door and shut down the power. Now, you can't talk about any of this without talking about Saudi Arabia's great transformation. For a long time, the stereotype was simple: dessert, oil, princes, fancy cars, that's it. But that's not what Mohammed bin Salman wants. He wants Neom, he wants shining cities in the desert, he wants tourist resorts that look like sci-fi movies, and more importantly, he wants to plug Saudi Arabia into the 21st century economy. AI, robotics, green energy, chips, massive data centers, the whole package. So when he shows up in Washington and in Silicon Valley, he's not just saying, please sell us tanks. He's saying, we want cloud infrastructure, we want AI partnerships, we want your best chip factories, we want your universities, we want joint research, we want to build something big, and we'd prefer to do it with America, not with China. And if you have even half a brain, if you understand that's an opportunity you do not throw away, so that some grumpy columnist in a Western newspaper can feel morally superior for 10 minutes. Here's where it gets very interesting. Artificial intelligence is not just a toy, it's not just cat videos and funny filters. AI is how you watch the skies, the seas, the borders, the pipelines, the power grids. AI is how you see the drone before anybody else sees it. AI is how you track the smuggler's boat at 2 in the morning in the fog. It's how you manage smart cities, smart grids, smart ports. Whoever combines energy, geography, and AI in the Middle East is going to have incredible leverage over global trade, finance, even culture. So what do you think happens when Saudi Arabia says to American tech giants, come, build your biggest data centers here. We'll give you land, power, tax breaks, whatever you want. Just bring your know-how and keep us out of China's pocket? I'll tell you what happens. Beijing gets nervous, Tehran gets furious, and a lot of people in Brussels start writing angry opinion pieces about digital colonialism, which is their way of saying we weren't invited. At the same time, the nuclear file is sitting on the table like a very large, very dangerous elephant. Iran has been playing its little game for years. We only want peaceful nuclear energy, sure, and I only eat salad. They enrich, they stall, they kick inspectors out the back door while welcoming them at the front door. They measure progress not in kilowatts, but in how scared everybody else is. Saudi Arabia looks at that and says, wait a second, so Iran can play this game and the world calls it diplomacy, but if we want nuclear energy under strict rules, suddenly it's a problem? So Riyadh comes to Washington and says, we want a civilian nuclear program. We'll sign strict agreements, we'll accept inspections, we'll do it by the book, but we're not going to sit here forever while our neighbor toys with the bomb and everybody pretends it's fine. That's where you get something totally new, a nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia that is the opposite of the old Iran deal. With Tehran, the weak leaders said, here's money, please behave. With Riyadh, the message is, here's technology, but under our conditions with our inspections. And if Iran steps over the line, they will face not one country, but an entire network of countries armed to the teeth and coordinated like never before. Israel, of course, sits right in the middle of all this, like the world's most nervous neighbor, and with good reason. They live next door to Hezbollah, Hamas, Syria, Iran's proxies everywhere. Their red lines are very real because if they miscalculate, they don't lose points in a poll, they lose cities. So when they hear about big deals between Washington and Riyadh, they don't just clap. They ask very hard questions. What are the guarantees? Who controls the nuclear fuel? Who sits in the control room when the radars light up? Prime Minister Netanyahu, love him or hate him, he's a survivor, understands that the old map of the Middle East is dead. The Abraham Accords started something very big, very beautiful, and now there's a chance to go even further, some form of normalization with Saudi Arabia, the biggest prize of all. But he also knows there's a price. Israel's security has to be ironclad, not written in small print. Hamas has to be reduced from game changer to annoying problem. And the question of the Palestinians cannot be left forever in the hands of a group whose business model is terror and whose retirement plan is martyrdom videos. So that's where part one leaves us, folks, at the edge of a new reality. The old Middle East, the one run by corrupt dictators, weak kings, and Western diplomats who loved conferences more than results, is cracking. In its place, a new structure is rising, a super alliance of American power, Saudi money and ambition, and Israeli technology and experience. It's not perfect, nothing is. It's messy, complicated, full of arguments, but it's real. And Iran, Hamas, and all the other resistance brands are watching it with one growing, terrible feeling. That feeling is very simple. It's called, uh-oh. So we've set the stage, folks. You've got the old order collapsing, the order where Tehran plays everyone for suckers, Hamas fires rockets and then cries on TV. The Europeans hold emergency meetings and emerge with absolutely nothing but a statement no one reads. Very powerful statements, by the way, the kind that scare no one, not even the guy who printed them. Into that mess walks a very different kind of project, an American, Saudi, Israeli axis that actually wants to win. Not manage the conflict, not reduce tensions, not express concern. Those are phrases invented by people who get paid no matter what happens. This new axis wants something the globalists don't even believe in anymore. Victory, real victory. The kind where the terrorists lose, the sponsors of terror get boxed in, and regular people, Israelis, Saudis, Americans, even a lot of ordinary Iranians who are sick of their regime and actually get a chance to live in something that looks like normal life. To do that, you need more than tanks and speeches. You need brains, chips, data, and very serious coordination. That's where artificial intelligence comes in. When most politicians say AI, they think of a buzzword to throw into a speech. We must harness the power of AI. They don't know a chip from a potato, But the people building this new alliance understand exactly what they're doing. AI is how you turn geography into power again. Think about it. The Middle East sits between East and West. It has the energy, the sea lanes, the choke points, the cables. For years, it was mainly a highway for oil and war. Now imagine it as a giant nervous system wired with sensors, satellites, radars, fiber optics, AI watching tankers in the Gulf, drones in Yemen, planes over Syria, data packets flying under the Mediterranean. The country or coalition that controls that nervous system doesn't just have influence, they hold the remote control to huge parts of global trade and security. Saudi Arabia knows this. That's why they're out there inviting the biggest cloud providers, the chip manufacturers, the AI labs. Come build here. Come plug into our grid, our cities, our ports. And they're not saying that to be polite. They're saying it with a calculator in hand. More data centers mean more influence, more leverage, more resilience when oil is no longer the king it used to be. And they are very aware that if they don't grab this future, China will be more than happy to show up with loans, surveillance systems, and a big red ribbon. Now, as this AI energy defense machine gets built, Iran and Hamas are left playing an old, very ugly game. They know how to smuggle weapons, how to fire rockets, how to shoot dramatic videos in front of burning buildings. But what do you do when the entire region above your head is covered by layered air defense, when your drone is detected before it even leaves the hangar, when your smuggling route is being watched from space and analyzed by AI 24 hours a day? You go from being the big tough guy in the neighborhood to the drunk cousin who keeps punching a brick wall. Of course, they will still be dangerous. A cornered animal is dangerous, but the balance changes. Instead of Israel and its neighbors spending their lives reacting to every little provocation, the initiative shifts. The new alliance can say, we decide when we escalate, we decide when we hit, we decide who gets to ship oil, who gets to move goods, who gets to use the big tech corridors. That's a different world from the one where every militant with a phone and a rocket can hold entire countries hostage. And let's not forget one of the most beautiful ironies in all of this. The same people who screamed that the Abraham Accords would never work, that no Arab state would ever stand openly with Israel, are now very quietly watching as the biggest Arab power of them all. Saudi Arabia edges closer and closer to some form of normalization with Jerusalem. They said it was impossible. But then they also said Brexit was impossible, my election was impossible, a lot of things were impossible. They have a terrible track record, these people. Now, nothing in the Middle East comes for free. The Saudis want a lot in return. Security guarantees, nuclear cooperation under strict terms, a big role in regional decision-making. The Israelis want absolute clarity on their security, no surprises, no trust us, it will be fine, because they've heard that song before, and it usually ends with sirens. The Americans, if they're smart, want to keep both sides in their orbit and keep China, Russia, and others from turning the region into just another playground for anti-Western coalitions. So you get these extremely complicated negotiations, lawyers, diplomats, generals, tech CEOs, everyone in the room, everybody pretending to understand everybody else. But underneath all the complexity, the principle is very clear. The message is being written into the new architecture in big, bold letters, even if they never say it out loud on TV. If you are with us, if you respect borders, if you reject terror, if you don't play nuclear games, you'll get access to markets, technology, security. If you're with Tehran and its pets, you get isolation, interception, sanctions, and a future where your rockets are worth less than a used smartphone. Let's talk nuclear one more time, because that's the beating heart of this whole thing. Iran thought the nuclear issue was its ultimate trump card, no pun intended, but maybe a little. They believed that by creeping closer and closer to a bomb, they could blackmail the world forever. Give us money or we enrich more. Lift sanctions or we install more centrifuges. They turned the entire thing into a mafia protection racket with uranium. Now imagine a different message, a Saudi nuclear program that is totally transparent, supervised, inspected, and plugged into a larger Western framework. The signal to Tehran is brutal in its simplicity. You are not the only game in town. We can build nuclear energy the right way with partners we trust. You keep playing games, and all you do is justify a tighter and tighter ring of defenses and alliances around you. It's like watching someone try to win a chess game with only pawns, while the other side is quietly bringing out rooks, bishops, queens, and maybe an extra board. Meanwhile, Hamas keeps trying to drag the entire conversation back to its favorite topics: victimhood, slogans, rage. They fire rockets, they take hostages, they hide behind civilians, and then rush to the cameras. They've been doing this for years because for years it worked. Every time they started something, the world stopped, held conferences, sent money, and then pretended to be shocked when it all exploded again. But the more this new alliance hardens, the less patience you see for that old theater. Israel is reshaping its strategy from mow the grass, hit Hamas every few years, and wait for it to grow back, to dig out the roots. Saudi Arabia, which used to fund all sorts of causes around the region, now has its eyes firmly on business, technology, and survival. The United States, if it has any sense left, is going to learn that enabling terror groups, directly or indirectly, is not balancing interests, it's lighting your own backyard on fire. And let me say something that almost nobody in the polite salons of diplomacy likes to say. A lot of ordinary Arabs, Persians, Israelis, Americans, they're exhausted. They are tired of being extras in someone else's holy war movie. They want jobs, stability, a future where their kids argue about football teams or pop stars, instead of which militia is more authentic. When they see data centers and high-speed trains and normal tourism starting to appear, and at the same time they see Iran and Hamas waving old slogans and broken rockets, the contrast becomes painful. One side is selling the past, the other side is building the future. Of course, everything I'm describing can still fail. This is the Middle East. Pride, ego, religion, history, they all crash into each other every single day. One miscalculation, one stupid decision, one assassination, and the whole thing can go sideways. But that doesn't change the bigger picture. For the first time in a very long time, the structural logic is moving away from chaos and toward order, not perfect order, not Scandinavian order, but a balance where the people who like war pay a much higher price than the people who like commerce, and China and Russia are not blind to this. Beijing would absolutely love to swoop in with its Belt and Road, build ports and highways, and wire the region with cameras and surveillance. Moscow would love to sell more weapons, stir more chaos, offer itself as the alternative to American influence, but an American, Saudi, Israeli core plugged into global finance and technology makes that a lot harder. It says to every country in the neighborhood, you can take Chinese loans and watch your sovereignty melt away, or you can plug into this system where there's at least some transparency, some rules, some upside that doesn't end with you paying interest forever. In the end, this isn't just a story about Iran, Hamas, Saudi Arabia, Israel, or even the United States. It's about who writes the next chapter of the Middle East. Is it written by men in bunkers chanting slogans over missile launchers, or by people sitting in control rooms full of screens?